Well, we did it, y'all. If you're watching this, it's the end of 2020. And while I don't really have particularly high hopes that 2021 will be any better, I think it'll at least be marginally more tolerable because of, slightly more government competence. So before we go from the shittiest year on record to a slightly less shitty year, it's time to put the cap on 2020 with our annual wrap-up video. Yay. So we're going to be doing things a bit differently this year. Rather than the usual list, we are going to be breaking this down into two lists. The first, obviously, is going to be my personal favorite horror films of 2020. And the second list is going to be a term that I'm lovingly adopting from May over on Nick's Fears, with her permission, of course, and that is going to be my list of holy shit films for the year. These include movies that may or not have been my favorites of the past year, but are definitely worth a watch for one reason or another, and the fun part is, it's not just limited to good movies. So let's start the fun with our first holy shit movie of the year.
This house seems unfamiliar.
Relic is a pretty awesome movie. It does incredible things with production design and symbolism while delivering on an incredibly horrifying, sad story about losing a loved one to degenerative brain disease. You know the feeling you get when you walk into your late grandparents' house for the first time after they're gone, and everything feels strange and haunted by their memories? Imagine that stretched out to 90 minutes. It might not have made it onto my favorites of the year list, but it is definitely worth checking out.
You like a werewolf or something?
After Midnight is the first of two Rustic Pictures films in this video, and honestly, there isn't too much I can even say about this one that I didn't already say in my official review. It's a film about relationships, and it's one that feels deeply personal to writer, director, and star Jeremy Gardner, and it's got one of the best jump scares of all time.
You're asking me to go off this theory you got about a white married male who happens to be a father living in the suburbs of Critica County, who also happens to be your AA sponsor, has been secretly running around, cramming objects, animals, and children up his ass. Then he somehow digests them, and he does this in sprees, almost in serial killer fashion. Is that about it?
Uh-huh.
This movie is something that ends up delivering on a lot of holy shit, and that movie is Butt Boy. Butt Boy is a stupid, ridiculous, juvenile film that has not left my head since I saw it. It's absolutely bizarre, and it has no business being this funny, stupid, or committed to the bit. It combines absurdist films like The Greasy Strangler with something a lot more serious, like Seven, and I can't let you leave 2020 without at least recommending one more time that you watch this gastrointestinal nightmare of a film. Told y'all not all of them are going to be good. Tate Steinsek's remake of Castle Freak is just a bizarre experience from beginning to end. It's not a good movie, and I am not recommending it to you guys on the merit that it is. I am recommending it to you because I think it is absolutely bonkers. There's a whole bunch about this movie that I did not like, and overall I wouldn't even really recommend it, but for two reasons I am. The first being the entire third act, which is just so jaw-droppingly insane and goes full tilt into Lovecraftian insanity that it has to be witnessed just because if you're a fan of that entire subgenre, you will enjoy that. The second, and I cannot stress this enough, is the entire character of Possessor, who... this man just rivals Tommy Wiseau. Sticking with the theme of Lovecraftian insanity, Underwater came out this year, and it feels like it came out 3 years ago at this point. Kristen Stewart gives a great performance here, but the real reason that this movie made this list is because it does not know the meaning of the word slow burn. Within the first 5 minutes of this film, things go from 0 to 100, and they do not let up until the film ends. Plus, I don't think anybody went into this movie expecting a cameo from Cthulhu himself. The next two movies are films that I did not review on this channel. I actually tackled as collabs over on Girly Gore, and the first of these movies is Scare Me.
Fred, what are you doing with that poker? Is part of the story?
And it's a truly one-of-a-kind movie that focuses on possibly the greatest horror of all, writer's block. It's a super unique fuck you to the idea of show don't tell, and it's a love letter to the creative process. Scare Me carries this warm, cozy vibe that emulates the vibe of ghost stories by the campfire, delivering fantastic performances from writer-director Josh Rubin and Aya Cash, with impeccable sound design to match. The Mortuary Collection is the second most shockingly fun anthology I've seen in a while. It's a modern-day creepshow with a meta twist, never taking itself too seriously, just a series of fun little morality tales with a ton of vision behind them, and this movie provides with all the gore, comedy, and practical effects you could ever want from something like this. It also features an amazing Angus Scrimm-esque performance from Clancy Brown, who is clearly having the time of his life here, and I think it's a great time. You can find it on Shudder.
I did something unexpected today.
Swallow is a terrifying, honest look at the patriarchal subculture of housewives, and the lengths a woman will go to in order to maintain some semblance of control over her autonomy. This movie's worth checking out on the merit alone that it deals with pica, which is something that I've never seen tackled in a film, but it's worth staying for Haley Bennett's absolutely electric performance that carries this entire film on her back.
Maybe this is how it was always going to end.
Thinking of Ending Things is a fascinating take on an already fascinating novel by visionary director Charlie Kaufman. And it makes sense that he would adapt this novel because it's already very intertwined with a lot of themes that he tackles in most of his works. And Kaufman, being the visionary director that he is, managed to take a novel that I would have considered unadaptable and not only faithfully translate it to screen, but tackle its ideas of an unreliable narrator in ways that I never would have even thought of. It's funny, it's bleak, it's mind-bending, and it defied all the odds by delivering an experience that's almost identical to the book. The only reason it didn't actually make my favorites list is because there are elements from the book that I really do wish it had kept, and the fact that it didn't let me down a bit. This was coming. Veronica somehow ended up being one of the movies that I watched the most this year, simply due to subsequent rewatches with my friends. It's one of those movies where just everything is fundamentally wrong, and the fact that it came from Glenn Danzig, who was 100,000% convinced of this film's seriousness at its world premiere, just makes it so much more hilarious. But I gotta give Danzig props. He made a movie that is no easy feat, and the movie he made is absolutely glorious and entertaining in the most insane way possible. It's filled to the brim with bad acting, terrible editing, nonsensical, incomprehensible plot, and enough long-winded strip club sequences to make up about a third of the movie. It is an insane film that is unquestionably from the mind of Glenn Danzig, and with the incompetence shown at virtually every level of the filmmaking here, it is no wonder that this movie has earned the title The Room of Horror Movies. And that's it for the holy shit movies of the year. Now to finally cap off this year with my favorite films of 2020, and then we can put this hell year to rest. So, kicking things off with number 10...
Don't be scared. Don't be scared.
The Beach House is by far my favorite Shudder original this year, and the one that has stuck itself in my brain like a footworm the most. I have not stopped thinking about this movie since I saw it at the Chattanooga Film Festival. It's a disturbing Lovecraftian body horror nightmare that preys on the fear of the unknown by stranding you with a small group of characters in an environment where there is nobody around, and you are forced to witness a widespread, terrifying, borderline apocalyptic incident from a very small window of perspective. You don't know what's going on, and the movie is not interested in telling you what's going on, just having you experience it from the point of view of these characters. It leaves you with a constant sense of dread once it gets going, and leaves you with a ton of disturbing imagery that will not leave your brain for weeks.
Yeah, this is bad.
Scare Package is by far the most fun I've had with a horror anthology maybe ever. It's a wonderful love letter to virtually every subgenre of horror filmmaking, tackling them all with a meta twist, ridiculously campy performances, over-the-top gore, and an amazing cameo from the legend himself, Joe Bob Briggs. The only reason it's not higher on this list is because not all of the shorts are winners, but the ones that are good are really good. And I've honestly never laughed harder than I did at One Time in the Woods and the night he came back again.
Let me help you.
You can't help me. Surprise.
Leigh Whannell's take on The Invisible Man is something that took me by surprise, and also a movie that I feel like I reviewed 2 years ago. Whannell is a director I'm a huge fan of, and his take on The Invisible Man is something that really blew me away. It's a perfect blend of the two genres he specializes in the most, sci-fi and horror. Elizabeth Moss's performance is fantastic, and Whannell's script takes a sci-fi concept that we've seen 1,000 times and turns it into a gaslighting, disturbing stalker film where we're in Cecilia's shoes the entire way. And the way it's directed and the fact that it speaks to the lack of belief in female trauma make it extremely easy to get invested with what this movie is trying to say, and it's one of the few films this year that had several sequences where I forgot to breathe.
You don't wonder what it tells me. It says I should be afraid of you.
His House is a movie that came out of nowhere for me. I had heard nothing about this movie at all, and it just popped up one day on my Netflix. And watching it was one of the best decisions I could have ever made because, wow, this movie is incredible. It's an impeccably made feature debut that really makes me want to see whatever Remy Weeks does next. It's a harrowingly true-to-life story that captures the raw, real trauma that immigrants go through daily, and combines that with the idea of the ghosts that we carry with us after said trauma. It's visually stunning, the acting is great, and the turns that it takes in his third act hit you like a ton of bricks.
Trust me. You have nothing to be scared about.
Damn, this was a miserable film. The Lodge is a chilly, atmospheric slow burn that was also weirdly prophetic of the pandemic that we're living in, tackling the madness that comes from isolation, as we've all unfortunately learned. Riley Keough's performance is absolutely fantastic, delivering a heartbreaking and terrifying performance as a traumatized ex-cult member. I've never felt physically cold from a movie before, but this one did it. I left the theater with a 1,000-yard stare, and this is another one that has just stuck with me. Fuck them kids. God damn, this was a good year for Lovecraft. Richard Stanley's return to filmmaking after 20 years was worth the wait. And Color Out of Space is an insane movie that provides you with all the body horror, all the Lovecraftian weirdness, and all the Nick Cage over-the-top freakouts that you could ever want. If you were a fan of Mandy for its visuals and its Nick Cage, you will love this one as well, because it's visually stunning, it's full of hallucinatory purples and pinks that make this alien virus feel otherworldly, and in my opinion, it is one of the best Lovecraft adaptations to date. And if there's one necessary watch for 2020, it's this one.
School's canceled.
Well, at least now you can't say things were so much harder back in my day.
Spontaneous was maybe the most surprising movie of the year for me, in that I didn't expect to like it so much, and I certainly didn't expect to be sobbing by the end of it. It's a quirky teen horror comedy, but it's also one that's deeply meaningful, viewing teenage tragedy through the eyes of a nihilistic girl who remains unaffected by it until it touches her personally. Sure, exploding teens is a funny concept, but when you realize that it's tackling the fact that kids nowadays have to face the mortality at a very young age, Catherine Langford and Charlie Plummer are both great here and have amazing chemistry together, and this is a beautiful, bloody coming-of-age story that everybody should see. I don't think there's any movie that can better exemplify the creativity that one can take during these times than Host. A movie written, shot, edited, and released entirely during the COVID pandemic, Host follows a group of friends who host a Zoom seance and end up contacting something sinister. Unfriended wishes it could be this movie. Not only is the acting much better, but its innovation and clever use of Zoom's software as a means of heightening the tension and creating new, unique scares is awesome. And it makes for a fun, terrifying watch that I would recommend checking out on your computer for the best results. To no one's surprise, Benson and Moorhead's newest film, Synchronic, makes the list yet again. Anthony Mackie gives a career best performance for him, and Jamie Dornan really proved he can act as well, because the only thing I had seen him in prior to this was 50 Shades of Grey, and he's bad. It's possibly Aaron Moorhead's greatest work as a cinematographer, and the story is one that is beautiful and emotional and boundless. It's existentially terrifying, and of course it factors into the greater Benson and Moorhead cinematic universe, where it ties into Resolution and the Endless in an interesting way. This is one of those movies that I know the majority of you haven't seen yet, but you will be able to check out very soon when it comes to VOD on January 12th, so keep that date in mind.
Good. Very good.
And yeah, My favorite horror movie of the year is Brandon Cronenberg's Possessor. Brandon proved himself to be just as talented as his father and tackled techno and body horror with such skill. Possessor is a beautifully made, nauseatingly gory film with the production design of Blade Runner and star-making performances from Andrea Riseborough and Christopher Abbott. Brandon clearly shares his father's penchant for body horror and practical effects, and the body horror in this movie is insane. Great acting, incredible effects, an amazing Blade Runner-esque aesthetic and score make Possessor one of the craziest, goriest, most unique, and thought-provoking horror films I've seen in 2020. It's one I definitely want to revisit very soon, especially now that my Blu-ray just came. And yeah, it's hands down my favorite. The strongest recommendation I could possibly give is that you watch Possessor immediately. And that's it for this 10th Circle of Hell of a Year. Thank you all so much for sticking with me for, wow, almost 5 years now. January next week, wow, we're gonna be hitting our 5-year anniversary, and for that, I've got something very special planned. I'm not gonna tell you what that is yet, but I'm gonna be introducing a new segment that I'm very, very excited for, and I think you'll all get a kick out of. So stay tuned for that next week. Thank you all for giving me the opportunity to talk about the things that I love. I hope you all have a very happy new year and a marginally better 2021. I love you all, and I will see you very soon.